Okay, hello and welcome, Corinne. Really glad to have you joining us today and that we're having this conversation cross-border. I was speaking a little earlier to another of your colleagues and our partners, Linda, but it's a real pleasure to have you joining us here today. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Would you like to just share a little bit about who you are, your relationship to us, and where you are in particular? Because that'll be part connected to the conversation we're having, which is diving into really looking at kids and stress and families and schools and early childhood programs and what we might be able to do about things in this particular moment in time, which is a unique one.
Yes. So I am in the U.S. I'm in New Jersey, particularly in Montclair, New Jersey, at a university called Montclair State University. And I am the assistant director for consultation services at the Center for Autism and Early Childhood Mental Health. And we have a partnership with you all as we're a licensed Self-Reg center here. And we've really been loving this relationship that really kind of evolved out of a relationship that our director, Jerry Costa, had originally had with Stanley Greenspan. And I actually studied in Stanley's program as well, the DIR work, and Jerry was my mentor for that. And so I was really thrilled to learn about the Self-Reg and see how this really fits. And for me, in my role, what was most exciting was that Stuart had really harnessed the expertise of people like you in schools and really understands that so much of this work needs to happen by helping teachers and supporting teachers. So I'm a school psychologist by discipline, and my master's is in ed psych. But right now, most of my work is in supporting teachers, both in school districts, working heavily with kids with autism and trying to help them be in more developmentally appropriate and hopefully inclusive classrooms. Also in early childhood centers throughout the state, working on inclusion and social emotional support, really with the teachers being sort of my clients, if you will. And then my doctoral studies are in teacher education and teacher development. So that's really become my passion point, is being a resource for teachers. And I have found Self-Reg to be such a wonderful stepping stone for me in terms of engaging teachers in conversations. Every time I get with a group of teachers and I bring up this, sorry for the phone, they want to talk about it. And it really resonates. So it's been wonderful.
Well, and you and I have links because I am, as you said, with Stuart's organization. I mean, there's several of us that are educated. I always call myself a teacher first. So,
right.
For me, I always will be, the schools and thinking, and I really consider the early childhood and across the sort of gamut, but I really think that schools are both in need of our support in so many ways. And there's so much good things that are happening there. And there's so much that we can do to help, I don't know, to begin to look at old problems that I worked on in my years in inclusion, and old challenges and old things that you were trying to solve. Some of this isn't new. We've known for a long time how important the relationship is and all of these sorts of things. But what is it we can do to reframe and look at old challenges in new ways that are really full of hope.
Yes.
And hula hoop. Full of hope. I've got a hula hoop in my vision here. So the important reason we wanted to have this conversation today was Stuart had asked me to do this. And in fact, when you said your director, it goes back to your director. I thought you were going to say, and my director, which is the wonderful Dr. Stuart Shanker, had wanted this partnership a long time ago, a couple of years ago. We've been talking about this, and now we're over a year in. But he also wanted us to have this conversation. He asked me, he said, what can we do? Because we're up here in Canada, and we're watching the news, and this isn't to dive into the politics of anything in particular, but what we're worried about is the well-being of people impacted by things that are going on in the world, but in the States right now, in your backyard and among our friends and our family and our neighbors. And I'm just wondering, can we start with, what are some of the things that you're seeing down there? what are you seeing in the schools or that you're visiting, or the children that you're working with, the teachers that you're working with? Are you feeling anything in particular at this slice of time?
So, yeah, I mean, I think that there's definitely a heightened stress everywhere for us. And I do see it in schools. We do work with a lot of school districts where there is a large, immigrant population. And so the stress there is enormous for families, just not knowing what's going to be happening for them. And I think for teachers also, that the stress that they have for the families and the students in their programs, but also the stress that we're all under in terms of really not knowing what's going to happen in terms of our Department of Education, understanding of the federal law that protects kids with disabilities. There's so many things that have come up since, first of all, even during the campaign, but then certainly since, the inauguration, that have really, I think, put people in a very heightened level of anxiety. It's palpable. I think you really feel it.
You're feeling it. We're feeling it up here. I'm feeling it coming into my home and because it comes to us through the news as well, right? And it's kind of like oozes into you and through your social media and in a number of ways. So, and we'll dive into maybe talking about some of the things we adults can do, because I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. I know I have a few on the things I'm trying to do to also stay very self-reg so that I can be there for my family and the people I work with and stay in a good place as well, even when, things get tough around me. But before we do, I want to just talk a little bit about children, okay? And so just thinking in particular about students and what some of it from your perspective, what are some of the election and the unknown and those sorts of things aside, because those are really, they get to me. But what it must be like to feel, I lived in another country. And I remember being in Italy. So I was in Italy and I had visa problems. I had a visa, but they had set me up to work there in a way that had caused issues. And the organization kept trying to figure it out and kind of did, but you still walk around with this bit of a fear and somebody's going to ask you for your ID. And I remember that. I remember traveling across, going home on vacations and so I remember even just that little bit of insecurity I felt as a Canadian, right? So I think about some of those things. But I'm wondering, there are other things at this particular time as well, even just the fact that this is February, we're having this conversation, and in schools, that's always a hard month. What are some of the things that you're hearing about that are happening in the schools or that you're with the children themselves? Are you hearing about any of these sort of outcomes or things that are down the path from the excessive stress?
Well, I do think, you mentioned about the media being in the home, and certainly I think that's one of the things that's so different in election cycles now, and just in general, just in the 24/7 media cycle, that, we're always, we can, if we choose to be, always tuned in somehow, some way. And I think, many of us have talked about how do we reduce that for ourselves. But one of the things I do see with some children is that different families are not sort of reducing their input of messaging. And for very good reasons, different families are very angry. They're very scared. And they're talking about these things in front of their children. And I know you had mentioned that one time we spoke about your own daughter's reaction, but I was in a school a couple weeks ago, and a colleague of mine at the school who was on the child study team was mentioning to me about a little boy who I think was in 5th grade and probably on the spectrum somewhere, already had a heightened sense of anxiety. But she said on Inauguration Day, he was under the desk screaming and crying that bad things are going to happen, bad things are going to happen. And it just, really spoke to the fact that he probably was getting that message from things he was hearing from others. And, not pointing fingers, but I think that the fact that parents are in such a heightened state and so scared and so angry about some of the injustices that they are seeing and potentially fearing, that kids are picking up on that. And what those bad things that might happen are, I don't even know that he knew what those might be. But that stress behavior was so profound that it really pushed him, over the edge to act out in a way that he typically hadn't been doing in school at all. So those are, that's one example that really sort of sat with me a bit.